Chapter 14. Our many souls, life and mind. Christian dogma is that we only have one soul that leaves our body at death and goes to either eternal punishment or everlasting reward. Alsatru, however, observes that our souls are made up of a number of parts that serve different functions during life and go to different places after death. Some of these soul parts apparently cease to exist almost instantly. Others dissolve gradually, and some move on to other dimensions. The question of what happens when we die is one we'll examine in another chapter, but first we must familiarize ourselves with various bits and pieces that make us who we are. The following pages I will begin with one familiar soul components and then move on to those that are less well known. We'll start with the physical body, then move on to ego, our sense of self. Next, we will look at the conscious mind, followed by the more shadowy world of personal and collective consciousness. In the next chapter, we will embark on more adventurous seas and investigate the enigmatic life energy, the ecstatic condition, personal, spiritual, and magical power, and finally those soul parts that seem to be independent of us, but that may actually be a part of our totality as human beings. The physical body, or leek. The first part of our souls we'll discuss is the body. The Old Norse is called the leek, pronounced leek, L-E-E-K. Anglicized is lick. We habitually think of the body and soul as being two distinct things, or even opposites. We regard our flesh as spiritual, insignificant, a mere garment we wear on earth and then discard when we leave the world. The body is not thought of as being us in any important way. Nevertheless, many people seem quite interested in the physical body. They sweat on treadmills, lift weights, get facelifts, and swallow handfuls of food supplements. We call them health-obsessed narcissistic. But maybe they instinctively realize that something more spiritual types don't. Denial of the body brings neither happiness nor spirituality. The body matters. Alsatru goes a step further and says that the physical body is crucial to development of other, less tangible components that make up of the whole human being. It may or may not be, strictly speaking, a part of the soul, but it most certainly is a part of what Ingrid Thorson calls the psychosomatic complex, referring to the body and the soul working together as an integral whole. Even the molecular level, the body expresses a spiritual essence. Our DNA is the encoded experience of our lineage in the physical world. Our genetic template transmits information across space and time, literally shapes us. Science has shown that heredity influences not only physical traits like the shape of our ears, the color of our eyes, but also mental traits such as personality and temperament. When we consider that even our personal values are partly hereditary, it becomes apparent that the link between the body and the spirit is a profound one. All spiritual evolution depends upon the body. We learn our lessons slowly and painfully, one at a time, through a lifetime of challenge, defeat, and triumph. In religious philosophies like Hinduism, this process may take millions of years, even millions of incarnations. And each moment of this growth occurs in a body. From birth to death, we learn how to deal with others, how to master our cravings, how to live fully, how to die bravely, mindfully, with dignity. None of this could be done without a body. Without a body, there is no experience of the world. Without experience in this world, there is no evolution. If there is no other reason than this, the body deserves to be honored by the spiritual traditions of mankind. People around the world use many practices to help them evolve to a higher level. Breathing exercises are among the most important, but how you perform breathing exercises without lungs or a nose. Most cultures use spiritual dances to induce altered states of consciousness. How do you dance or shake a rattle or beat a drum without feet and legs and arms? The power centers called chakras in yoga, or wheels in Asatru, are developed by vocalizing certain syllables and through body part postures. But you certainly won't be sounding any syllables without a throat, or assuming any body postures if you don't have a body to begin with. All this is related to the fact that we who follow the traditional ways of Europe love the world. Earth, this holy home our ancestors called Midgard, is where evolution happens. All the parts that make us who we are come together here. Every day is another opportunity to become, to love, to fight, to laugh, to cry, to grow upward towards our great destiny. All of this happens in the body. Using leek for your advancement. The body is absolutely necessary for accomplishing anything in this world. But beyond that, the condition of the body can either help or hinder your spiritual quest. If your body is strong, flexible, and in all-around good working order, it is clean on the outside and free of debilitating toxins on the inside, your progress will be faster. Some disciplines carry this to great lengths. But even following the simplest rules will help. Keep your body strong. Use resistance exercises such as weights to develop muscular strength and endurance. Run or swim to build your cardiovascular strength. Keep your body flexible. Stretching is particularly important for spiritual development because flexibility and relaxation aid the flow of subtle energies throughout the body. Keep your body clean inside and out. Your skin is your largest organ, so wash it daily. A weekly sauna will help eliminate poisons from your system. Eat foods that are nutritious, and when possible, choose foods that are natural or organically grown. Give your body a good environment. Spend at least some time outside daily. Get a little sun, but not too much. Breathe some fresh air. Walk in the forest. Let your body and soul remember the natural world, what the natural world feels like. The ego, or ek. The ego is our awareness of individual existence as a self. It is that part of us we identify as I. During our lifetimes, the ego is usually located in and identified with the physical body. The Old Norse term for the ego is ek. Buddhism says that the ego is a transient illusion. Christianity demands the ego be subordinate to God or Jesus. I recall a religious tract from my youth that urged us to take ego off the throne of our heart and put Jesus in its place, complete with drawings of just how this would look in case we didn't get the idea. This is the very opposite of Asatru. Unlike Buddhist, we exist in this world. And unlike authors of the Little Christian Tract, we'll stay firmly seated on that throne in our hearts. We want neither to dissolve the illusion of ego or to surrender it to any outside force. A strong ego demands our personal freedom, our existence as sovereign and distinct personalities. Any philosophy that advocates blending, merging, submitting, or surrendering our sense of self is anathema to the spiritual truths of our European ancestors. On the contrary, the traditional wisdom of the ancient Europe tells us that it is possible to enlarge our sense of self by realizing that we are actually much more than our everyday I-ness would have us think. This deserves further explanation. To the materialist, we are only a fleeting consciousness that temporarily inhabits the physical body. When the body dies, nothing remains. In contrast, with this limited view, Alsa teaches us that we are made up of the powers, energies, and various subtle soul components outlined in this chapter and the next. All these can be cultivated and strengthened by various spiritual practices. Those who are persistent can tap into these unseen parts of our being, realizing that each is a part of who they are, and thus attain an expanded sense of self. An example of a portion of ourselves that we do not normally experience would be the Carl Jung called the unconscious. Although we are not usually aware of the unconscious, which is why we call it the unconscious in the first place, we can learn to explore it and eventually integrate its contents into our psyche. Attaining what Jung called individuation, exploring the soul components of Alsa is much like this. The idea in both cases is not to become something essentially different from what we are, but to realize that we truly are in the first place, and to gain capabilities that come with allowing all of our soul components to inform our awareness. In the native European view, then the ego, or ek, is the only bad if it is limited by our small, superficial notion of who we are. Even then, it is not really evil, only incomplete. For even a restricted sense of self is better than becoming one with God, dissolving into an infinite sea, or merging with the oversoul. Using ek for spiritual growth. Most people have a very poorly developed ego. This may not seem true, since we all know plenty of egotists whose every thought is of themselves. But strangely enough, being egotistical is not a sign of a strong ego. In fact, it is often quite the opposite. Egotism is born of fear and desperation. What we hope to cultivate, however, is much more meaningful, a definite, constant sense of one's identity and as distinct self. For the average person, I changes with every passing emotion and scattered thought, while what is needed is true awareness and permanence. Few thinkers have understood the difference better than P.D. Ouspensky, who was associated with G.I. Gurdjieff's fourth way. The theory and techniques outlined by Ouspensky's in the Psychology of Man's Possible Evolution will be useful to all Alsa who seek to develop a functioning ego. Because the ego is, among other things, the part of us which wills, it is important to develop your willpower. There are many misconceptions about will, but the best approach I have seen is in the works of Roberto Assagioli, who formulated a school of thought called psychothesis. Any books by him or by his students are valuable guides for those who would grow stronger wills. Another way to strengthen the ego is to learn the art and practice of victory. Seether, the Old Norse. Winning is a powerful form of self-affirmation. Learn to be victorious in as many ways as you can, intellectual, athletic, and so forth. The true depth of the Norse term, Seether, have, I believe, never been clearly stated, and much wisdom awaits those who penetrate its secrets. A caution. Nothing here should be construed as advocating the narrow, deceptive, and self-satisfying glorification of oneself. There is all the difference in the world between egoism and egotism. One is puffery, the other genuine development. Those who have come so far are humbled by those excuse me. Those who have come far are humbled by how far they have yet to go, and they will not belittle those who have accomplished less. The logical mind, Hugr. In the northern lore, Odin has 2 ravens that fly forth every day and report back to him at night. Their names are Hugin, thought, and Munin, memory. They represent 2 soul components called Huther and Muni, respectively. These correspond roughly to what psychologists would call the left brain and the right brain functions. First, let's look at Huther. The Hugr deals with left brain cognitive skills, reasoning, logic, thinking, judgment, counting, and measurement. It is linear and analytical and works sequentially rather than holistically. Think of Star Trek's Dr. Spock, and you will have a good idea of what the left brain functioning is like. Many of us are driven by our emotions. We don't use logic to make decisions, but instead use it to rationalize the things that our emotions tell us to do. This is not always a big deal in daily life, but it creates a haze of self-deception that surrounds our actions, and ultimately, this works against our success or even against our survival. We must see the world as it literally is and not as we may think or as we might like to imagine it. When we are driven by emotions, we are less likely to be in control, less likely to be working our will in any conscious way. The idea is not to suppress the emotions, however, passion is good. But when our logical mind is in control, our command of our mental faculties is more definite, more deliberate. Using Hugr for spiritual growth. As you study our ancestral spirituality, stay anchored in what is objectively known as the ancient ways. Study the scholarly evidence presented by historians, anthropologists, linguists, archaeologists. Learn to tell the difference between facts and subjective flights of fancy. Teach yourself to see what is, not what you might want to see. Apply these standards not only to the exploration of our lore, but to other subjects as well. To learn objectivity, pick an issue on which you have strong feelings. Now study the other side of that issue, not pouring through it with the idea of refuting the arguments, but seriously challenging your preconceived notions. Try arguing on behalf of the other side in an imaginary debate. Take up games of strategy such as chess, the Viking board game of Tafel, or historically gaming. Studies mathematics, logic, or one of the hard sciences like physics or chemistry. Memory, the mini. Memory, as we mean it here, can be roughly equated with the right brain functions. Those mental faculties express an images or symbols rather than precise words or numbers. One part of this memory is individual, based on personal experience and filtered through the emotions and the situational context. This memory is often subjective and difficult to analyze in any useful manner. Our memory includes another part as well, the reservoir of images and distinct originating outside of our personal experience. This is comparable to Jung's collective consciousness. The many then encompasses both the personal and the transpersonal. Much of this is storehouse of images and patterns is common to the human race as a whole, while other portions are specific to the Germanic or European peoples. It may also be called the ancestral memory, metagenic memory, or the folk soul. Sometimes symbols or symbolically significant events can trigger recall of this material, and much of this can be spiritually useful. For example, working with the runes or performing ritual acts can strike a resonance with the soul component, giving us insights of value. Content of both the individual and the collective memory often expresses itself through feelings, intuition, and images. Using many for spiritual growth. Just as Odin left one of his eyes in Mimir's well, so that he could know the secrets contained in its watery depths, we, too, must explore the personal and collective memory. We must come to know those parts of ourselves that are hidden from our sight, including those parts we would prefer not to face. When done in a psychoanalytical context, this work of self-exploration is best accomplished through Jungian analysis. This is a highly specialized process, and most of us are not able to undertake this work for ourselves. Nevertheless, any of us can gain by becoming familiar with Jung's writings on archetypes, symbols, and dream analysis. You can take this work farther by keeping the dream journal and working with the unconscious content revealed while you sleep. However, a way more to keeping it with the way of our ancestors is to study the magnificent system known as the runes and actually internalize these mysterious using the rune thinking exercises given throughout the 9 Doors of Midgard by Edred Thorson. Some parts of the rune study are very linear and logical. Memorization and contemplation of these basic meanings of the rune staves, for example. However, there comes a point at which the runes speak to our souls of the student in ways that touch upon ancestral and metagenic memory. This creative and non-linear opening of the hoard of archetypal imageries is the very essence of memory in the sense we are using it in this discussion. Vital breath, the ond. The vital breath, or ond, as it is called in Old Norse, is a subtle energy which seems identical to the Hindu concept of prana, as well as Japanese and Chinese ideas of qi and qi, respectively. When German occultists in early 20th century wrote the rune might that coursed through their bodies, they were apparently sensing the flow of this energy. This life force obviously plays an essential role in the physical body, but it is also key to developing advanced levels of consciousness and spiritual power. From this point onward, our discussion, the Ond, is crucial. All the exotic soul components covered in the next chapter depends on this subtle energy. It is the key to unleashing the ecstatic state or wond, and its factor in the growth of individual power known as Haminga. Even our relationship with seemingly independent entities like the Valkyries or Fetches is facilitated by this mysterious energy. Using the Ond for spiritual growth. This vast amount of information on manipulating and accumulating prana, ki or chi, is relevant to the quest of the vital breath. Key among these are the breathing exercises used in yoga, known as pranayama. They range from a very simple to a very complex. You should start with the basics and only then, preferably with the help of a teacher, begin exploring the more advanced routines. Probably the simplest exercise of this kind is to observe your breath as it flows in and out of your body. The technique is called Hang Sa or Ham Sa. It is excellent for this purpose. Precise instruction can be found in many books and websites dedicated to yoga. There are also activities for sensing the flow of energy in different parts of your body, particularly the hands. By briskly rubbing your hands together, separate them, then slowly bring them near each other again. You can feel what seems to be energy field between your hands. There are many variations on this experiment, all of which teach you to perceive and control the flow of energy throughout your body. Practice breathing energy into different parts of your body, the stomach, the knee, and so forth. This is done by visualizing energy entering the chosen portion of the anatomy as you inhale. It sounds very strange if you have not tried it, but with a little practice, it becomes very easy. Some writers recommend this as a way to speed the healing of injuries. Some martial arts have much to teach us about the vital breath in the form of ki and chi. The emphasis differs from the style to style, but from teacher to teacher. One place you will definitely find it is in the Japanese art of Aikido, which, as the two letters in the middle of the word suggest, is all about using the power of ki. Another tool for using the vital breath is Stadagalder, or posture magic, the Nordic equivalent to the asana of yoga positions. Stadagalder involves assuming positions imitating the shapes of the rune stems, sounding the appropriate verbal formulas, and channeling the rune might through your body. Persistent practice gives many sorts of physical, mental, and spiritual benefits. In the next chapter, we will continue our investigation of the soul. So far, we have been on more or less familiar territory: the ego, the body, mind, and the energy found in the breath. All of these, except the energy associated with the breath, are things we have known about all our lives. In the upcoming passages, we will build on this foundation as we look at some soul components, which are considerably stranger.